Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Dursley Tabernacle. My name's Simon Helme. I'm the minister here, and it's good to see you all. Where have you all come from? Let's have a look, shall we? Who's from Dursley? Hands up if you're from Dursley. Hands up if you're from Cam. Hands up if you're from Stonehouse. Hands up if you're from Stroud or Rodborough. Oh, there they make the noise. Who let them in, eh? And wider fields. Anybody want to shout out where else you're from? Where? Wootton, of course. Yeah, Wootton. Worcester. Worcester sauce. Anybody else want to shout out where you're from? I'm from Worcester. You're from Worcester too. Yeah, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. It's a special evening tonight, and this came about really because I was privileged enough to have a sabbatical this year, and as I went on sabbatical at the beginning of April, this report came out, so I never really had a chance to read it because I was on sabbatical. But I kept hearing about it through news feeds and headlines and stuff like that. I thought, well, something's going on. At the end of my sabbatical, I went to the parliamentary prayer breakfast at Westminster with our MP. And there was a seminar after the breakfast by the Bible Society on this quiet revival. Well, I think it was about Bible confidence, but there was a presentation. And the presentation was by Rhiannon McAleer. And Rhiannon stood up to give the presentation. I nearly fell off my seat. Because Rhiannon had started coming to this church around about after Christmas time in the new year. And I'd met up with her a few times. I knew that she worked for the Bible Society. I didn't twig that she was the author of this report. And it was absolutely sparkling presentation. And being as I am, I collared her afterwards and said, you must do that in Dursley. And so here we are. It's been a really groundbreaking report, quite revelatory. Encouraging, maybe, but also Rhiannon brought out the nuances in the presentation, which I'm hopefully she will tonight. It presents opportunities and challenges for us as churches as to how we respond to this moment in culture and in our society. So the structure for tonight is that I'm going to invite Rhiannon to come and make this presentation, about half an hour or so, maybe she runs over. We'll have a 15-minute comfort break, so there's opportunity for you to refill your cups if you haven't already. There's coffee and tea over there, decaf and normal, and water and biscuits, so if you're getting low in your blood sugar, over there. And then we'll come back and we'll have about another half an hour or so of discussion and questions, where you can put questions and comments to Rhiannon, and I'll try and share that discussion. Okay? So hopefully we'll finish by 9, no later. If you need the toilets, talking about coffee and tea, if you need the toilets, there's a toilet out here on the right across the room. There's also toilets upstairs, which you follow up the signs to the upper hall. If the fire alarm should go off, get out. If it's a false alarm, we'll call you back. We are recording this event. A number of people have said that they can't be here. Are you recording it? We are going to record it. We will put it on our YouTube channel in next few days. So we will have a link to that. So if you want to, if you know people who you'd like to have heard this, then do get in touch. Shall we just start with a word of prayer? God, we thank you for the gospel. We thank you that the gospel tells us that you love us and that Jesus shows us that love and brings us hope. It's not a popularity contest, however, on whether that is true or whether or not people believe it. Yet we would hope that more people would believe and that it would transform their lives. As we hear about this latest research suggesting that the people in our nation are warmer towards faith than they have been for many years, help us to hear what they say, to have the courage to respond with openness, with vision, with prayer and with action. We give you thanks for Rhiannon and all the team at Bible Society, and particularly Rhiannon tonight as she comes to share with us and we ask your blessing on our meeting. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Rhiannon, over to you.
Oh, well, good evening, everyone. It is so lovely to be with you on home turf. I have given a version of this presentation to many people from all walks of the church and all walks of life, but it's really great to be in Dursley and really talking about what this means for our local community and how we can really move this amazing missional moment forward. So Simon said, I'm Rhiannon. I live in Dursley. I come to the Tab not every Sunday, but I do when I can. And in my other role, I am the Director of Research and Impact at Bible Society. I won't bore you with what that involves, but basically we do a lot of research, trying to understand what is the place of the Bible and Christianity in England and Wales, and increasingly around the world. And we do this because we believe research and insight is a tool for mission. That if we understand where people are coming from, then we can better meet them and we can better serve them and hopefully bring them deeper into a journey with the Bible. Now, normally I start my presentations with this slide because people haven't always heard of Bible Society. My sense is over the last 6 months that might have changed a little bit, but we will recap anyway. So we're one of Britain's historic charities. We were founded in 1804 by William Wilberforce and other members of the Clapham sect. And we have a royal charter to encourage the wider circulation or use of the Bible. And that's what we've been doing since 1804. So in the early years, our work was mostly around translation of the Bible and distribution into places where scripture simply wasn't available. But more recently, particularly in the Western world, as the Bible has become so available, everyone's got one in their pocket, should they wish to have one, our work is more around Bible engagement. And that means we're here to really help people access the Bible better, to understand it, to be able to read it in a way that really speaks to them and helps shape their personal life. So within the church, we support Christians to know and understand the Bible better. As we'll see as we go through the presentation, this is not preaching to the choir, right? Like there are real challenges within the church when it comes to the Bible. But we also serve people outside of the church and those who wouldn't necessarily identify as Christian or practicing Christian, trying to help them encounter the Bible in a way that makes sense for them so that they might further have encounter with its author. And we are part of the United Bible Societies Fellowship. Now, I always get told off because I can never remember the exact number of Bible societies around the world. There's a lot. The one I can remember is more offices than Coca-Cola. So we are around the world. We're part of a federation. It's not just my Bible society telling everyone else what to do, and that's amazing. So we work with Bible societies who might just be one person with a volunteer working under the most challenging circumstances a Christian can live in, all the way to the very large funded Bible societies like the American Bible Society in Australia. And together we want to see a Bible engagement movement for the 21st century, and England and Wales is part of that. Now, before we get into our report with the Quiet Revival, I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot has been said about the change around Christianity this year. It's certainly not just our data set. So these are some of the headlines and stats that I've pulled together when I did the prayer breakfast presentation. So we started off early in the year that Gen Z are half as likely as their parents to identify as atheist. This has come up time and time again, this idea of Gen Z being a spiritually open generation, not carrying that kind of cultural baggage of even my generation, the millennials. We've seen Bible sales going up really significantly. And I have heard so many stories of booksellers saying it's really weird. People are coming in and asking for Bibles. I've heard stories of friends who've got older children, teenagers, young adults saying, my friend wants a Bible for Christmas or for their birthday. Like, what should I get? And the Bible is really, we're starting to see maybe the Bible is even trending. So there's this renewed interest, and we'll unpack that in the stats as well. There's been authors like Lamorna Ash talking about Gen Z's search for spirituality. Other data sets pointing to renewed interest in the Bible, that particular 33% from Fusion, the student mission society. This chart here is from YouGov, not our data set, looking at belief in God really rising there. I appreciate you might not be able to see that one, but we can put it up in the break maybe. That one in the middle, Google and Ye Shall Find, is my favourite chart here because this is behavioural data. So what it's showing is Google searches for the Bible and Christianity rapidly shooting up around the pandemic. So there's a lot going on. It's not just our data set. The picture is still emerging. We're not the final word, but something is happening, and many people around the country are sensing it. Extra confirmations in Catholic Church, Baptist Union having a bumper year for baptisms, which is great for them. The chart in the corner there is Evangelical Alliance's report on church growth among evangelical churches. So, turning to the Quiet Revival as told by Bible Society. Our journey started in 2018. We wanted to do a bit of a study, a setup, to really understand what is the place of the Bible in England and Wales today. What do adults think of the Bible, Christianity, the role of the church? Is anyone open to it? Does anyone want to know more about it? So we started by surveying 19,000 adults in England and Wales. For those of you who are into stats, you probably can appreciate that is a ridiculously large sample. You don't normally need that many people. So your typical survey you would see quoted in the papers is probably between 2,000 and 3,000 people. We went to 19,000 for statistical reasons, but it's a large and reliable sample, and we delivered that with the YouGov panel. So YouGov are one of Britain's largest and most trusted polling companies. They're used by the government and academics and businesses and anyone who needs to make decisions based on what do the general public think. So they are reliable and credible, and we've worked with them extensively ever since. So we reran the full survey in 2022, did it on a smaller sample of 3,000 adults in England and Wales. That was a bit of a weird survey. The results were odd. There was a bit of what we've come to understand of pandemic shock. So whereas we'd seen in the 2018 survey a lot of strong opinions, people knew what they thought, around 2022 this had changed, and we were seeing a lot of people saying they neither agreed nor disagreed, or they didn't know about things. And that was Christians and non-Christians. So there's a sort of sense of uncertainty, which really made sense with what we were seeing elsewhere in our kind of listening of the community. But we kind of felt we needed to go again, basically. So in 2024, we reran the full survey again, this time on 13,000 adults in England and Wales. So it's much closer to the 2018 data set in terms of its statistical reliability. We've polled bits of the survey in between, pretty much on a yearly basis, but these are kind of the pillars, if you like, of the full survey there. And we found some really interesting and exciting things on the 2024 survey. So we found the number of adults in England and Wales saying they go to church at least once a month had gone up. The church is growing, but it's also changing. The demographic profile of the church had changed quite a lot since 2018. We found that church-going is good for you. It's socially and personally impactful. So churchgoers make a difference to their communities and feel the benefit of being part of community. And we saw that there was a growing spiritual openness among non-churchgoers as well. But there was challenge as well as opportunity in the data that we saw. So this is the section that grabbed all the headlines, but there's another story that we'll get into as well. So in 2018, this is the age of church-going. So basically what it's saying to you there is 4% of 18 to 24-year-olds say they go to church at least once a month, and of those who are aged over 65, that goes up to 14%. Any sociologist of religion would have drawn you this chart without even looking at the data. This is what we expected to see, that church-going was something that older people did and younger people did not. So that was unremarkable and fine. We like it when data does stuff like that. In 2024, the picture looked really different. And what we saw was this very dramatic and very interesting U-shape. So what you can see there with the dark blue is the 2024 data. You see this radical increase in the number of young people saying they attend church at least once a month or more. It's up a little bit at the over 65s, but it's not really changing that much in the middle. And that's really interesting. Because if you kind of think about the people in positions of power in media or even the church, for example, I'm going to move for the microphone. They're probably here, so might not be seeing what's going on here. And we can maybe talk about that more in the discussion. But this is really important as well, is that beyond age and gender, we're seeing an enormous level of ethnic diversity across the church, particularly in those aged under 55. So in those aged under 55, close to a third from a ethnic minority. And that's compared to 16% of the overall population. So we are a diverse church, and this really matters, especially in a world which is trying to polarize us. And we also saw a change in the kind of expression of the church, theological expression, denominational profile, for example. In particular, we saw that while the Church of England is maintaining majority share, there's been a real rise in the number of people saying they're practicing Catholic and a rise in the number who are saying they're Pentecostal. And kind of on the current projections from our data set, we would expect to see Catholicism grow to be the biggest active church over the next few years. But only a very brave person makes predictions. We also saw that the church is looking really quite vibrant, which is really exciting. So we saw that across the board, whatever your denomination or expression, weekly Bible reading had gone up. So in 2018, 54% of churchgoers said they were reading the Bible at least once a month. It's now gone up to 67%. Like that's great. Like, well done, church. Rates of belief in God have remained very high, and this is important because one of the things that has been put to us, and you would perhaps reasonably ask, is, are these people going to church just looking for community? Are they looking for a free cup of tea on a Sunday or an evening? But our data set suggests no. It suggests that, the people who are there believe in what they're seeing, and we'll unpack that further. But correspondingly, we see that the number of people in the general population who say they're Christian but don't go to church, we could call this nominal Christianity or cultural Christianity, that is decreasing. And this is really important because that is something that is very well observed in excellent data sets like the census. And our survey maps very well onto that. So it's kind of giving us validation towards the data, but also saying that increasingly nowadays, if you are a Christian, it is not a cultural label. It's something that means something. And there is a generational effect on that. Older people in our population are more likely to say they're Christian and not practice. But the younger you are, the less likely you are to say that you're Christian, but don't do anything about it. So if you're kind of thinking of what does this mean for the future of the church, it's one that is active, and it means something to be here. And this is something that we're seeing across Europe as well. And it makes sense sort of sociologically in lots of different ways. We're seeing high Bible engagement and hunger, particularly among young Christians, and we see in general what we call in Bible society, Bible confidence has gone up. So we're really looking at a church which feels different, even to 2018, let alone perhaps the early 2000s under the heights of the new atheists. So both growing but more engaged, and that's the really important thing I'd like you guys to take home. So, a brief detour. We ask some questions early on in the survey to warm people up. We don't launch straight in with, do you believe in God and what do you think of the Bible? We get them going in a different way. We ask them a bunch of well-being questions. And what we saw is really interesting here was that churchgoers are more likely to report better life satisfaction. Now, I'm giving you the high-level statistics here. The statisticians in the room, we have run various regressions and all of this to make sure that the pattern holds, and you can read a little bit more about that in the report. The dark green bar is your churchgoers, the grey bar is your non-churchgoers, and what you can see is that they are statistically more likely to say, I'm happy with life right now, that life feels meaningful, I'm hopeful about my future. They're less likely to say, I frequently feel anxious and depressed. And really interestingly, they are way more likely to say, I feel close to people in my local area. And when we look at the young people in the survey, and because it's so big, we can do that with a reasonable degree of confidence. For our young people or young adults, this is very important, feeling close to people in your local area, particularly for young men. So there's something about connection and community that is very important for the young people exploring church, perhaps for the first time, particularly young men. We also see that church makes a difference in community. I don't need to tell you guys. that, but it's important to celebrate it. Churchgoers are more likely to give regularly to charity, to volunteer their time, to donate to a food bank, and to take part in local environmental improvements. So, a new atmosphere. In my presentations, I always include what are called the brutal facts. That hasn't changed, and I'm going to keep talking about them even in the good news story. This is the reality of the big picture. 79% of people in England and Wales hardly ever or never read the Bible, and they don't care. Like 7 in 10 of them, at 67%, say they're not interested in discovering more about the Bible. And for the most part, you probably won't be able to read that in detail, I think, but for the most part, this is because the Bible is seen as largely irrelevant to them. So we see from our survey that while people think it, for the most part, is culturally important, so they would say, yeah, 60%, it's good for children to know at least some stories from the Bible. It's important to know about the Bible because it shaped our culture. Once we get into the realm of the personal, the Bible is relevant to me personally, agreement drops right down there to just 25%. So it's culturally important, there's some relevance to society, but it's not relevant to me personally. The Bible, for the most part, by most adults in England and Wales, is seen as something cold, on a pedestal, not for ordinary people like them. Most people in this room, I imagine if you're Christian, will have a moment where someone has spoken about the Bible to you in a way that felt relevant, that spoke to the personal situation you were in. Most people in this country never have an encounter like that. So when we get on to thinking about how do we help people discover the Bible for themselves, just really hold on to this relevancy and that personal connection, because it's very important for helping people see the Bible differently. But we do see a change. So in general, our survey is pointing to quite what I would think is remarkable spiritual openness, certainly compared to 2018. So 56% of non-churchgoers would be happy for a Christian friend to pray with them. That rises to 62% among the 18 to 24s who don't go to church. Close to a third, that's 31%, of non-churchgoers would go to church if invited by a friend. And those non-churchgoers, if you can see the asterisks, they're special non-churchgoers in our survey. Those are people who have never regularly attended church. And 18% of non-churchgoers are interested in learning more about the Bible, but that shoots up to a quarter of 18 to 24-year-olds. And when we break that by gender, among men, young men, it's even higher. Again, we also see openness around agreeing with the statement, it's a positive thing for Christians to talk about their faith with non-Christians. 47% of non-church-going 18 to 24-year-olds, close to half, agree it is a positive thing for Christians to talk about their faith with non-Christians. That was not the case in 2018. Something has changed. And as we'll go through now in the next slides, we'll see that relationships are key to this. So, of our non-churchgoers, 19% say if friends or family recommended the Bible, I would give it a try. But if we compare that to celebrities or thinkers, it's just 9%. So people matter, relationships matter. For all we hear about social media, and it is important, and we can talk about the role it has played in this cultural moment, those relationships with friends and family are key. And this is where, if the church is going to meet the spiritual moment, we've all got to get confident with talking about these things. So what would help the spiritually curious understand the Bible? So for those who are interested, this isn't everyone, it's those who say, I'd like to know more. It's something that helps break the Bible down into manageable pieces, something that helps relate the Bible to everyday life, that relevancy theme again. Talking with people who hold similar beliefs to me. This is a big thing for spiritually open people. They often worry they're going to be preached at, and they really don't like that idea. They don't want to be told what to think. So there's something about creating safe spaces here that matters. Exploring the Bible through art, film, music, like culture, and what I'd kind of zoom in on here is this is the experiential. And when we look at the church growth stuff, what comes out again is churches that speak to the whole body, all the senses, not those that are just speaking to a head-led faith. It's that which is in the heart and helps people feel things, and this encounter, experience. These are the things of our generation, of the moment. an opportunity to talk with Bible experts. So that's great. You've still got a job, Simon. It's fine. So moving forward, how does the church respond to this? So we think there are a number of things, you can read them in the report, that we think we'd love churches to do, but I'm going to focus on these two. I've spoken about prepare for spiritual curiosity. We think it's out there, we think it's coming. It's not everywhere in all the same ways. I'm not saying there's going to be a rush on Sunday mornings around Dursley and Cam and Wootton, but it's certainly out there in other places. And really get serious about Bible discipleship. This is something that all churches, wherever you are, whatever's happening in terms of your growth, can prepare for. So among churchgoers, the majority want to know the Bible more. 86% of church-going Christians are interested in knowing more about the Bible. That rises to 90% of our churchgoers under the age of 35. They want to know the Bible, right? We sometimes worry that Christians are put off by the Bible. It's a difficult text, no one's denying that, but the hunger is there, and we really do need to meet it. Now, I'm going to introduce concepts of, we call them Bible confidence. It's head, heart, hands. It's a lot of information, but bear with me, and it's all in the report as well. So head confidence is like how you navigate the Bible, whether you understand what you're reading, can you pick it up and find what you're looking for, and can you talk about it? And if you remember what I was saying about relationships, this skill to be able to talk about the Bible with confidence, not worry that you're going to be wrong when you talk about it, is really important. 32% of churchgoers say they're not confident they could find relevant passages in the Bible. That's about a third. Here is a quote. I spend a lot of my time talking to Christians about this sort of stuff, so I've got many quotes. The difficulty in finding passages which apply to everyday life at that point in life. If experiencing an emotion like jealousy, what part should I read? And close to a third, 33%, find the Bible hard to understand. Lots of language is heavy and old-fashioned. It does feel like a chore. And this word chore really interests me. People can do challenge, right? Ordinary people take on the most powerful challenges all the time. They learn the most ridiculous knitting patterns, or they run marathons, or they learn to code in their spare time. They can do challenge, but no one likes chores. So how do we take the Bible from chore to challenge? The next dimension of Bible confidence is what we would call heart confidence. It's about your emotional, spiritual connection with the Bible. Is the Bible a site of encounter with God? Does it fuel your spiritual life? Here, churchgoers tend to do pretty well. So we can see here that 78% of churchgoers say, I feel closer to God when I read the Bible. And again, thinking back to what I said, can you remember that time someone gave you a Bible verse that made you feel seen and made you feel heard? That's what we need to be really building from childhood all the way up to adulthood. Bible confidence of the hands is about how you apply the Bible. Does it shape the way you act in the world? This is the most important thing, really. 81% of churchgoers agree the Bible informs how I live my life. That's great. Big picture. It's not that the Bible is irrelevant. But 38% of churchgoers say applying the Bible to everyday life is challenging. And there are some warning signs further in the most recent data, particularly among our young churchgoers. Now, I really do need to stress the young churchgoers in the survey are great. Like, they're showing really high Bible hunger. They want to know it better. They're reading it regularly. They're confident to talk about it. Like, they're there. But there are these warning signs. The yellow bar is the 18 to 34-year-olds. The grey bars are older Christians. So we can see across these statements that young Christians are more likely to say, my confidence in the Bible is often shaken by the media and British culture. My faith is undermined when I read or think about some parts of the Bible. And even that I have less confidence in the Bible than I used to. It's a really difficult and complicated picture we're seeing emerging here. And I do wonder whether part of this is because they're reading the Bible more, they're up against it. They're up against the difficult bits of it, and they've got questions. And this is where this is important, because while 39% of 18 to 34-year-old young Christians say they find it challenging to find appropriate Bible resources and guides, but it's just 22% of those older than them. So they are more likely to say it's hard to find appropriate resources. And 44% of them say finding people to learn from is challenging, compared to just 25% of those older than them. So really high Bible hunger, high Bible love, but a feeling of they're not being met with the questions and the resourcing that they have. And what we know from our wider research into what grows Bible confidence, there are some really key things. I don't think I've got a slide on them. Sorry if I have and I've forgotten. But it's things like early foundations, right? Childhood exposure to the Bible is one of the most important things that Christians can do. It's one of the best indicators of lived confidence in the Bible as an adult. It's the same with faith in general, by the way. The earlier you're exposed to faith, the more likely you are to get it as an adult. It's things like appropriate resourcing, and it's mentoring, having someone to learn from. Like, this is so important, and it's one of the things we mention in the report, that churches really do need to get good intergenerational communication and helping young Christians, learn from those who've had lifelong faith there. And we really do need to address these things, otherwise those brutal facts, they're not going anywhere. So this is the missional moment. This is the time to act. So what would help churchgoers? I wonder if some of this resonates with you. If it doesn't, you can tell me to write a better survey, and that's fine. So the number one thing is, again, really similar to our spiritually open people, something that helps relate the Bible to everyday life. Talking with others who hold similar beliefs. That fascinates me, that this makes the top 5 for churchgoers, because I put it on the survey for the non-churchgoers, but it always ranks. So there's something, isn't there, about familiarity and safe space. And I do see in my wider work, when I talk to churchgoers who aren't so confident in the Bible, they're really worried about saying the wrong thing, even in small groups. They're worried about not knowing enough about the Bible. It's almost like a permission thing, like I'm not allowed to do it, I'm not educated enough. And sometimes these things are tied into trauma in childhood, where you were made to feel stupid by a teacher that had nothing to do with the Bible, but none of us want to be feeling that level of vulnerability again. So creating these safe spaces, even within church, is so important. Something that breaks the Bible down into manageable pieces. Opportunity to talk with Christians is kind of probably quite similar to that second one here. An opportunity to talk with Bible experts. People want to learn, and they want to learn well. So the number one reason churchgoers want to know the Bible more is because it could help me know God better, and because it could help me grow spiritually, which is a great place to start. Right, Bible Society plug coming. Okay, we can get the tea and coffee going. If you are a church leader and you are interested in meeting the missional moment around Bible confidence, particularly within churches, we have just relaunched the Bible course. This is a great course. It takes you through the big picture of the Bible, how all the bits fit together. This new edition has been extensively focus grouped. That's where I was last year, was in many focus groups around this, making sure that the new edition really improved on the old one. But the evidence we have on the old one is that it really does help Christians join the dots and help them see themselves in the bigger picture as well, which is really important. Part of the 2018 survey is available at somewhere called Lumino. So if you search Lumino Bible Society or lumino.bible, you will get there. It's only the 2018 data. We haven't updated the website yet. But as part of the 2018 data, we did what's called a segmentation. So we did some statistical modelling of the data, and we identified these 8 Bible types, if you like, in the population. We call them personas. So they are audiences, if you like. So the red and the pink, you typically find them in church, got Bible-loving, who really get the Bible, it's central to their faith. Bible infrequent, who will be regular churchgoers. Being a Christian really matters to them. But the Bible is hard, and they want to know it better, but they don't quite know where to begin. They'll definitely be the people who are pulling up those numbers in my survey. And then we've got the Bible conflicted, uncertain, and nostalgic. They're what we would call spiritually open and spiritually curious. Now, I think those groups have probably changed a bit since we did the modelling in 2018, but these are a great place to begin. So if you're interested in understanding where are perhaps spiritually open people coming from, this is one place to begin. And of course, there are other research projects out there as well. The other 3 are the colder end of the spectrum, And those are very interesting too, if you're interested in learning more about the different types of atheism and the barriers to the Bible that people down that end have. And one really interesting thing that we've been observing year on year with the personas is we saw at first that spiritual middle ground. They started to come up as proportions of the population, and then it's gradually been shifting into the warmer ends, whereas the cold end has come right down. So we did wonder what was coming a few years ago when we started to see that shift. Sorry, I'm kind of miming the bar chart because that's how I'm thinking about it. So something was coming early on. You guys are lucky because you have a copy of the report. These are rare items. We only did a print run of 500 originally, which was woefully unprepared. But I did nick a box from work. But should you... perks of the job. Should you wish to download the report, please scan the QR code. I'm not on social media. I don't do anything like that. But Rob, who is the other author, would be delighted should you wish to engage with him on social media, although he is on a break from work looking after his baby at the moment, which is lovely. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, everybody. If you'd like to just reconvene with us. Rhiannon, thank you for that presentation. It was very slick. I take it you've done it a number of times now.
Yeah, one or two.
Tell us where the tour has taken you and who's been interested in this.
It's been a lot. We released the report back in April. It was a very quiet release. We just did a very small press launch in London in one of our offices. And it was picked up by the Times in a really... It was fine. It wasn't that exciting. And then we had colleagues at Spring Harvest, which was the same week, and they were telling me everyone's talking about the report. And that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is going in a different direction. And it trended on Twitter and all sorts of things. And there was really this kind of groundswell reaction from the church, and was picked up extensively in Christian press. And life has not been the same since. So for the last 6 months, there's been a lot of talking about the report in all sorts of places. So done a lot with the mainstream media, but... And
you received some challenges. The humanists haven't been happy, have they?
I mean, shock. Humanists are not happy with the Bible Society, but...
Methodology's been questioned, hasn't it? About the... Did they question the methodology?
Yeah, it's a very brave flex, as the young people might say, to take on Britain's most respected polling agency, but they've had a go. There are always questions about whether surveys are the best way of understanding religious behaviour. We are reliant on people telling us the truth and understanding our questions well. This survey went through extensive what's called cognitive testing in 2018, which is trying to understand, is the survey working? So could an atheist answer it as well as a churchgoer? Trying to identify sources of bias and things like that. So we know the survey works well. We're not worried about that. We've worked with YouGov extensively ever since. We understand how their panel works. But there's always the possibility that people are saying they go to church, but they don't actually go to church. And that is just the nature of this kind of research. So my question is why? Does anyone really think church-going is so cool that everyone's willing to lie about it in a way that they weren't in 2018? And if they were, is that not interesting in and of its own right? So are our numbers the final numbers? No. Will future data sets nuance this? Absolutely yes. Is it a valid and useful picture to say something is going on? I think so. And I've yet to see a genuine methodological challenge that has shaken my belief in the methodology anyway. And if you don't like this survey, don't listen to any survey, because this is as good as they kind of come in this sort of form, basically. And if that's your view, that's fine. I don't mind. It's just a survey. It's just a model. But it is pointing us towards something. And this is being now backed up by those other data sets I mentioned in different ways. Some people have said this is quite a hot read on the situation, and I'm okay with that. I think that's probably true. But I am very confident in the trend. And we're seeing it all over the Western world. Like if you look at the data in France, more young people, especially young men, going back to church, exploring Catholicism, taking it from a cultural thing to an active Christian identity. There's stuff coming out of Scandinavia and Finland. There's something happening all over the place, and sociologists, academics will argue about the true extent of it, and that's okay, but something's happening.
I remember at the Westminster seminar that you gave, I think Chris Kandahar said he thought, I can agree with it, but I think the word revival is maybe a bit strong. And I don't know how you'd respond to that.
It's a quiet revival. Quiet's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I mean, look, I'm not a theologian. We just needed a title for the report, and we felt that was a fair title in the sense of there is a massive change to the spiritual atmosphere and what's going on within the church. And perhaps it hadn't been noticed in a joined-up way because most churches work within their denominational sort of lenses and can get kind of really invested in their particular nuances, and that's fine. There's a place for that. But the strength of this approach is it has that bird's eye view of it, and I truly believe that the response from the Christian community would not have been as it is, was it not resonating with people on the ground. And our sort of sense and our reflection over the last few months is this is a conversation the church wanted to have and kind of felt like it perhaps wasn't allowed to have it because we've always been told the church is in terminal decline. And so there was a sense that what people were seeing maybe was anomalous. And then we've kind of come in and been like, oh, we think there's something happening across the board. So it's not a revival of the old times where it was very regionally focused, and you have things like Toronto Blessing, which are like these massive outpourings. It's much more understated, and it's not happening everywhere. It's really important to really mention that. If you're not seeing it in your church, you're not doing anything wrong. There's quite a strong urban slant in the data. It's more likely to be seen in urban areas and areas where there are high levels of young people. But since we've released it, there's been an absolute avalanche of feedback of people saying, yeah, we're seeing this. Or at first we didn't believe you, but then we thought about it and was like, oh yeah, we've actually had 10 new people who didn't know anything about church, and they've joined us over the last couple of years. So it's Krish, he's a great friend of Bible Society. He can have that view.
Okay.
We don't mind. Others disagree.
Quiet. Okay, over to you. So questions. Emma's got a roving mic, so if you've got a question, put your hand up. I'll pick on you, and then Emma will come. We've got a question down here. Emma, please. Thank you.
Hi. Why do you think there's a statistical significance about an increase in men being interested in Christianity?
Thank you. And I didn't pull that out in my presentation as clearly as I should have, but there is a strong gender slant in the data that it's young men who are saying they're going to church a lot more. There is a rise in young women as well, but it's just not to the extent of the young men. And also in the spiritual openness, the young people saying they want to know more about the Bible, the numbers for young men are crazy high. I think it's a really complex question, and I would always preface this at this point by saying we don't know, and a lot more research and a lot more listening needs to be done. A lot is said about young men, and there is a lot of fear sometimes that if young men are doing something, then it's probably a problem. Which kind of say glibly, but there's truth to that as well. And we've certainly seen around our report concern that is this a canary in the coal mine about a turn to conservatism and all of these sorts of things. Is it related to the Andrew Tate in the manosphere and Jordan Peterson and these kind of things. And we don't know from our data, but what I would say is our data points towards young men particularly feeling this community. That is a benefit for young men who go to church. And the crisis of mental health among young men is acute. And we cannot underestimate that. And there are other things as well. There'll be people who are much more tapped into masculine culture than I am. But we see in general youth culture like a turn towards positive practices, right? Like going to the gym regularly and abstaining from alcohol and wanting to cultivate healthy habits. Like this is mainstream culture for many young men. And I think kind of church going can be part of that, like discipline and tradition and looking for something stable. Like I don't think it necessarily needs to be a political motivation. But it's certainly something that needs more research. But I mean, I met a young man when I went to the Church of England General Synod who's just like the archetype of this whole thing. And I asked him, like, well, tell me about your practice. What does Christianity look like for you? And he talked about fasting, right? Like how important that was to him, and that when he's fasting, he's reading the Bible because he had a great line. Like fasting without spiritual practice is just starvation. But it very much ties in with this wider cultural thing around discipline, I think is what it is. And young men searching for structure and meaning, but like don't ignore the community side of it because that's really important.
Liz, anything you want to come back to on that? Okay, thank you. Phil, over there.
Hi, is there any evidence that this is not unique to Christianity, that the quiet revival is happening in other faiths? And if so, is that a different challenge to the church, or is that, how do we respond to that?
It's a really good question. I don't know data sets yet. But I imagine it will come out because what I have heard, particularly from teachers, when we've talked about this, is like, yeah, but it's every faith. So it's not necessarily that people are converting to Islam, say, but for those who are in a Muslim community, it being a practicing Muslim expression being really important rather than a cultural one. I've certainly heard it among Sikhs as well, but more widely, yeah, there's been a massive boom in alternative spiritual practices. Witch talk on TikTok. So like light magical practices, astrology. And this is part of that shifting spiritual atmosphere. So you're absolutely right to pick up on that. This is not necessarily a default interest in Christianity. And when we see in surveys like ours, we're asking, do you believe in God? Well, our particular question is designed quite precisely around, do you believe in God, gods, or higher powers? And then we ask a follow-up question about the nature of your God. But when people are saying, I believe in God, they're not necessarily talking about the Christian God. And it's really important that we try and work out like what that common ground is. But yeah, there are different challenges, right? So the challenges of the new atheist time were around the classic apologetic questions like, is there a God? Why would he allow suffering? Is there life after death? Like, all of these kind of things. There's still a place for those. Those are still needed. But the questions nowadays people are asking is not, is there a God? It's, why your God? And the challenge for churches where people are exploring faith is kind of trying to work out where people have been on their previous spiritual pit stops, if you like. So sometimes people might be coming with spiritual trauma because they've tried other things and it's not worked out. And that includes other expressions in Christianity. Or they're still practicing those things. They're not ready to let go of manifestation and all of these things while they're exploring Christianity. And those are very different challenges to the kind of like zero start level that maybe we were at when the new atheists were the dominant thing. So yeah, does that make sense? Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Gentleman at the back.
Thank you. The quiet revival, how much of that do you think is down, if anything, is down to problems that we have in the world at the moment, like such as global warming, Russia and Ukraine, the Middle East, and the general fear of World War III?
Oh, it's really hard to say. There's undoubtedly, when you talk to people in general, a sense that something is broken at the moment, and whether it's those particular fears of war or more a meaning crisis, like what we were sold that would make us happy, people are realising doesn't make us happy. And, you know, a kind of searching for an alternative way of doing things is really important. One of the interesting things that I'm still trying to unpick in my head, I certainly don't have all the answers, is the role of the pandemic in this. I think it had started beforehand. If you read people like Justin Briley, like he was already picking this up when we were starting our surveys. And our 2018 survey didn't show it, but he was starting to say, oh, there's a shift in the intellectual atmosphere. But when we did the focus groups in 2019, I've got one in one of my atheist groups, and he says, one of these participants, I'm not interested in any of this stuff. I've got a good life. Maybe if there was something like, I don't know, a global pandemic, I might be interested in it. Oh, I completely forgotten about it. I saw it in my notes about a year ago, and I was like, whoa, that guy's a prophet. There's something about that time that was an accelerant, a time when we saw everything for the fragility that it was. Like I said, there was uncertainty in our data sets around that time where people didn't know what to think. They also had that pause button, a time to reset and rethink. Social media, breakdown in community, all of these things are all feeding in, and the cultural narratives have shifted as well. But what I would say, and I'm sociology trained, and that's my academic background. The thing that has been quite challenging for me personally in hearing the stories is there is a strong spiritual dimension to this. So it's not just about people looking for meaning in kind of like a transactional sense. Like, people are talking about dreams. Like, they're having dreams of Jesus, or that they should be in church. And I've never heard anything like that in the main sort of British population. It's usually a kind of thing you see in other parts of the world. And people are talking about encounter with something beyond themselves, whether that's a religious experience or I'm attracted to this because I believe it to be true. So all of those things are important, and there's this extra, you know, in the mix of it also is unexpected things. And that's the interesting thing about the moment, is trying to have those conversations and, yeah, learning from the ground what's going on. And I've learned so much since we released the report. So as you can tell, I'm still thinking it through quite a lot.
Thank you. Any comeback you want? Okay. There's the handsome, hunky gentleman sat next to my wife, please. He's a family friend, indeed.
Not anymore, is. Thank you, Bible Society, for a great piece of evidence-led work. So we're not talking conjecture but data-led work. So thank you. I guess listening to you, if I got it right, what I find more shocking is not that people are more open to discuss and attend church, but when they do, what they're likely to find is biblical illiteracy. They're not finding people who know their Bibles, who can talk about the Bible or relate it to their everyday life and application. Have I got that right? Because that's a shocker.
Yeah, that is what our data kind of supports. One thing I've heard a lot over the last few months from young Christians, whether they're childhood Christians or new to the faith, is they want full fat faith and they want full fat Bible. And they feel that the Bible is being watered down, and they want to grasp it. Like, one guy I heard was like, oh, my group want to get into the Hebrew and the Greek, but kind of a feeling that, yeah, they're not being encouraged in that, and that's certainly what we've been saying for many years. That Bible confidence kind of issues with this quite significant minority of the church has been present since 2018, and we really love to see that change. But there are, as I've mentioned, some of them like really tangible and difficult barriers. Like the hunger is there, the desire is there, but the Bible is a difficult text, and it's not that there's any shortage of resources. There's probably too many resources. Like, how do you know where to begin? And many, maybe you should answer this, Simon, but like many church leaders are stretched thin, and trying to keep the lights on and stop the roof from leaking, and trying to sort of steward good Bible engagement is a challenge among many others. So I don't know, thoughts?
I'm interested in the full fat Bible. And I know, one of the problems with the lectionary is that it generally cuts out the really interesting bits, the bits that are always a problem. And I found, I often, when I use the lectionary, I usually include the bits that they want me to censor. Because actually I think the difficulties with the Bible are the interesting bits and how you handle that, and how you handle it responsibly. And I wonder if there's any research about what the young people particularly, are they attracted to the more fundamentalist, literalist forms of Bible teaching, or are they more attracted to those who want to engage it and put it in its context and to see its relevance for today?
That's kind of the next research project, really. We do got to keep my job going. We do see from the survey, and I haven't published the data because I'm not entirely happy with how we asked the survey question, but we see that the young people are more likely to have what we call a high view of Scripture. But it's a very difficult thing to survey because it is so complex, and it's much better done in qualitative work in focus groups. My sense though from what I've heard so far is they're not looking for easy answers. And one thing I'm really interested about is we know that the more kind of Bible confident you are, or if you're in what we would call our Bible loving segment, the more likely you are to agree with the statement, I find some parts of the Bible disturbing. And so it's not necessarily that when you're high in Bible confidence, you don't acknowledge the Bible's difficult and it's challenging, and there's bits that make us feel really deeply uncomfortable and that make us question things. But what it doesn't do is damage our faith. And so sometimes we see in less Bible confident Christians, like that's actually the nub of it. They're less likely to say, I find the Bible disturbing, or I find the Bible really challenges me, because it's almost like they don't have that confidence to admit that. So yeah, I think it's okay to find the Bible challenging and complex, and it can be a sign of high Bible confidence, and that managing it responsibly is the key thing.
Sorry, gentleman at the back, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested to know more about universities and schools. I guess the University CU must be a really cool place to be if you can get a seat. But in Camandursty, where we only have schools, is there any evidence of anything under 18-year-olds, and what could we do to support our kids here in Camandursty?
Our survey's only adults, so it's the 18s and ups. There is a piece of work, I can't remember the report's name. It's by Youth for Christ, who have been kind of running a similar thing to us over the years on, what do teenagers and young people think about the Christian faith? And they've been running that survey. I think they've done 3 waves of it now, and it's pointing in a similar direction to ours. So do encourage anyone who's interested to have a look at that data. from what I can recall of it, is pointing towards more young people saying they're interested in going to church regularly, reading the Bible, but really quite significant challenges again around authority was an interesting one. So one thing they saw that was different in this most recent data wave was young people saying the source they rely on most to help them understand religion is themselves. And that was a big shift. So this sense, and the way they unpack it in the report is that young people kind of have so many places they can turn from, and they're aware of the limits of the internet and social media and fake news and all of this kind of stuff. So who can they rely on ultimately to help them work things out? It's themselves. So yeah, that is interesting data. I've certainly heard anecdotally from teachers and chaplains that there's something going on among young people in schools and openness again. I don't know about Cam Dursley in particular, but I would love to know if you can get in and kind of find out the questions young people are asking. But my sense is they are similar to what our young adults are asking, which is, how do I navigate this difficult world? Where do I find meaning? Where do I find purpose? And the interesting thing, biblical literacy has been mentioned. I think it's probably fair to say biblical literacy is at an all-time low for Britain. And there's been a lot of angst generationally about this, and it's the same with Christian literacy as well. But it's almost like we've gone through 3 generations of de-churching now. And while that felt like a real threat, there's opportunity in that because people aren't coming in with the cultural baggage that they had, and it's a chance to tell the stories, encounter the Bible afresh. The other people who've done interesting research on this is Youthscape. So they did an amazing piece of work over the last 2 or 3 years looking at what are the generational trends of would be Generation Alpha now. So what are the things that are shaping their worldviews? What are their concerns? So really recommend looking into that because it's very high quality, really, really good piece of work. And then they did a piece of work looking at the questions young people are asking, so, those big existential, spiritual questions. And then I don't think they've published this yet, but they then put the Bible in front of young people and got them to do a reading back. And some of the data we've seen with that was absolutely fascinating. The way they're interpreting it is so fresh, but it's really important to have those conversations because the issues they have with it are not the issues that, my generation have with it. So I'm hoping they'll publish that in the next year or so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Question, Daniel?
Hi, thanks for this evening. It's not a question, but it's a sort of a testimony just for people to consider as well. So before coming here, I'm from South Wales. I know the accent doesn't suggest that, but the last few years, that's where I've been. I was at church one day when a teenager came in with her mum. And she'd never been to the church before, and she just said, I've been doing whatever the subject is at school, so I would say RE, but I don't know if that's still the case. She said, I found God in the study. I want to become a Christian. How do I do it? Just in that happening, a lot of things that I've taken from that. Firstly, the person that she spoke to when she came into the church didn't know what to do. So which marries with a lot of the research that you've shared tonight. The other is her mum wasn't a believer, but she trusted her daughter and wanted to support her. And that's why she came along. One of the challenges we were facing when she started sharing, she wants to come to church, she wants to know what it is to become a Christian. the church time was wrong for her because she had a Sunday job and it clashed with when church was. And so I was able to talk to her and just talk about, and she was totally genuine, you know, the way she shared about this faith that she had, it was totally, utterly genuine. But it just spoke to me that God's using not just the church, but other things, and that's something for us to be mindful of. And just for us to be, as you've shared so much tonight, the church people to own their faith, to be able to share it to share it in a way that's so natural. As you were saying, they're looking for people who know the Bible, but I guess to know the Bible that resonates with their lives as well, so it's authentic.
Oh,
So I just wanted to share
thank you.
that. So she was GCSE age. Yeah.
Thank you so much. There is so much in that very personal testimony that really resonates with the big picture that I've been hearing. So, young people getting a parent to bring them along, and not necessarily from a church background, and people just turning up. Like, I hear that phrase over and over again, people just turning up. And the other thing that really interested me is kind of like online discipleship. So this is something I've heard from a few church leaders, is people coming into church almost half-formed because the algorithms have been serving them up interesting content. And I like this. And then I go and listen to a podcast and I learn a bit more. And then I find out people who think like me go to church, so I better find a church. So they kind of come in this really interesting, I don't know, like, they've done their work. So the questions they've got are not the seeker-sensitive approach of perhaps 20 years ago. But there's also like a naivety of what it is to be in community. And I think that's another really interesting challenge of our time, is how do you take people from that quite individualized exploration to the messiness of being in community and learning from each other, and as well as equipping, you know, the church to meet them with the questions that they have. It's a very powerful story, and one that I would say really is very becoming increasingly common. I've heard very similar ones over the months. Also, the church not knowing what to do with people, like that's quite a common one, of young people turning up and church leaders having to ring the diocese to let them know and hope the diocese will send someone to help. But the other question I get asked a lot is, there's always like an anxiety when people like that turn up, like, oh, I don't have a youth worker and I need to change everything. And it doesn't feel that way. It's like people are attracted to what the church is now, and they've got questions and they want that faith experience, but we don't need to change. Like, this kind of idea of Christian weird, I think, is back.
I want to ask you in a minute, just as a last question about these recommendations. Yeah, at the back of the back. Just time for one last question though, from the audience. Christina.
Thank you. It's just a quick question. You mentioned the young lady came in with her mother. I just wondered if she had a Bible at all, if she'd been given a Bible or her mother had a Bible, or if it's possible for the church to actually give the young lady a Bible. And I was just talking to my friend here how we access Bibles as children in the school. Primary schools gave them out when we were little, and my friend here, he had one at Sunday school. It was such a treasure, and it's always a treasure lifelong for me. My Bible that I had at my baptism is a treasure. I wonder if there's any access. How do young people these days, where can they get a Bible from? If they haven't got, they've got little money and no... on the mobile. Not everyone's got a mobile. Young ones, you know, they haven't always got...
I think most young people have mobile.
I do think it's an important question.
I still treasure my Bible.
Yeah, sure.
And I would think a young one would be only too glad to receive a book?
I think it's a really important question, because while Bible access is in general for most people in England and Wales not a problem, like anyone who's got access to the internet can access a Bible, anyone who's got access to a library can access a Bible, there is still something about the physical book that matters, and that's in the report as well, that young Christians who are practicing Christian, they read their printed Bible at the same frequency as they use Bible apps, right? Like the physical book still matters. But what I would say is the gifting of the Bible is only part of it. The thing that we see a lot of is that invitation to read with you and be your guide. That's the bit that needs to be part of this conversation. So yes, they can get it, but they need the guide.
Okay, last comment. Sorry, last comment.
Yeah, so it isn't a question, it is just hopefully an encouragement, Christina, that my daughter was given a Bible at her school 4 years ago in reception, and hopefully my second child will be given one in a couple of weeks' time. She's just started, so it's still happening.
And Bible Society is a great source of Bibles.
Just to finish off, because it's 9 o'clock now, there's some recommendations at the back of your report, which you make. Do you want to make any comments on these, Rhiannon?
Yes, there are 4 recommendations. Firstly, we call for society to take church going seriously, both in terms of it's not going away, but also that it makes a positive impact in communities. And so if you are a policymaker, please take that recommendation to heart. But the ones that are probably more relevant to us tonight are, we really think it is important that churches prioritise discipleship and growing Bible confidence. Like this is so foundational to a strong faith that allows you then to naturally bring it into your whole life. So this is why we're encouraging things like the Bible course. We have a new Bible coming out in January called the Everyday Faith Bible. So we're really committed to meeting people where they are. And this growing Bible confidence in the church, this spiritual openness, they are a virtuous circle, right? So when society is more confident about the Bible, Christians feel better about it. Like we see this over and over again, they feel better about their faith. But when Christians are more confident in the Bible locally, they can shape their local communities. And it goes round and round and round. It's like, I call it the engine in work. We think it's really important to make space for intergenerational conversation and spaces for these young and passionate Christians to learn from those who've lived faith with its ups and downs over the long term, and we think there can be really fruitful conversations. And again, churches sometimes worry, right? Like, I've got a few young people, I need to put them over in the youth group, and they'll do their youth thing, and that's important, right? Like, everyone needs spaces for themselves, but it's also about that wider integration, but it comes with that real positive mentorship. So yeah, churches, since we put out Quiet Revival, we've heard quite a few starting mentoring programs, and it's not Bible Society led, I've got no right to the data, but what I hear back is that's working really well. So that's a nice tangible thing to consider, is mentoring. And we also call on Christians to kind of recognise the importance of interpersonal relationships. Like, you guys in community, you are probably the best door for people to explore faith in a way that works for them. Social media, podcasters, influencers, they've all got their place. Like, this changing cultural atmosphere is driven at that level. And while there are things going on, like with online discipleship and spiritual encounters that seem to come from out the blue, this interpersonal, long friendships, building trust, this is over and over again something that we see as being so impactful for change for individuals and communities. Yeah.
Thank you. It's gone 9, and so we must draw to a close. Rhiannon will be hanging around just for a few minutes if anybody does want to collar you. But I think we should just express our thanks once again to her. I hope you've been given some food for thought and some challenges to take away and some thoughts to think about your own practice within your own churches. Shall we just give thanks to God for that and just commit this to prayer? God, we thank you for your word, even if we don't quite understand it. Help us to grow in confidence and to grow in confidence in sharing that. And so, as we encounter others and they encounter you, may we have those times of mutual encouragement. All to your glory's sake, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everyone.